Welcome back to another episode of TrueNAS Tech Talk. We're less than a week from the .2 release of Fangtooth, and we're actually coming up on the code freeze for the first pre-release versions of Goldeye 25.10 coming this fall. We'll clear up a couple questions today about containers going forward, and we'll take a couple viewer questions from the audience as well. So welcome back from our brief little break, Chris. We are closing in on the release date for 25.04.2, so Fangtooth's sort of enterprise kind of release.
Absolutely. Hope you had a good vacation, Chris. Yeah,
I did.
Out we're human and do like to take summer breaks too. Go figure.
Every so often it does happen, you know.
Yeah, every now and then, real life. But yeah, the .2's coming. So Fangtooth .2's dropping next week. So if you're watching this episode, say right after it drops here tomorrow on Friday, you should only be a few days away. So keep a close eye. I know we have some folks who like to hit the refresh button a lot, and I don't know, you amaze me sometimes how fast you guys detect the updates out. I mean, we haven't even pushed the release notes yet. And there's only like a small few minute window there usually, but all right, cool. Nice to have fans. So hopefully we'll be able to get some feedback from listeners and users next week for next week's episode as well, because it'll be out in the wild for a few days. This release did get a bit more extensive time in QA. So those who are wondering like, oh, isn't this a bit longer than the normal cadence between say the .0 and .1? That is correct. Because the .2 is typically when our enterprise customers begin their upgrade journey to the new release. This release is no different, and so we try to take a little bit extra soak time before going out with .2. So
we did also have some changes in the .2 that, of course, everybody's familiar with. It was the virtualization classics, so we wanted to make sure that everything in that front went really well. Just for people who are looking to, whether they're saying, I want to go from, Fangtooth 25.04.1 upgrade and get this pane back, or the people who said, I've been waiting for this from 24.10, so now I'll upgrade directly without having to go through sort of the Incus transition for my virtual machines.
Yeah, no, that'll be good to get out in the wild, and hopefully that piece is solid. That did get a lot of extra time as well. Interestingly enough, we also were taking a look at the numbers. We had the Fangtooth prior to this .2 release surpass 100,000 systems in the wild just this last month, which is huge. Each release since basically Bluefin days of scale has kept growing and surpassing its predecessor in terms of the total user base and the rapid uptake at which people were applying the updates, which is good to see. In the legacy days, FreeNAS days, people really upgraded very slow, and that's nice to see that trend that people are staying a bit more current and on top of security fixes and all that good stuff. And of course, we'll do our best to keep that trend going, hopefully in Goldeye and long beyond. But with the .2 about to drop, we should mention, we expect this to be the last major release of the Fangtooth series. Of course, we always have exceptions for security issues, or if there's any hotfix worthy things to get pushed out into the wild, of course, we will do that, but nothing to speak of yet. So knock on wood, hopefully it stays that way for a while.
Exactly. I mean, it's always up to if Microsoft's going to release some new patch for things that's going to break stuff or break a dependency, then, we might have to do a hotfix in there. That's what we had to do with even, Core 13 got its little, I think it was U8.
Yeah.
Ended up there.
Yeah. You can't predict those because, again, we sometimes get surprised too. Things are embargoed and then they get announced and we got to respond. So again, we'll keep it open for that, of course. That's all just kind of normal practice around here. Meanwhile, the attention shifts going forward to this fall's release. So let's talk about Goldeye, the next big thing.
We're coming up on the internal code freeze for Goldeye. So that's 25.10, which of course by its number indicates it's going to be a production release in October. But
Correct.
we're coming up on an internal code freeze for that first version at the end of the month here, Chris. So what does that mean for us as far as the internal freeze?
So what does that mean to us? And then externally, what do you see? So July 30th is the date on the calendar. That's roughly a week from now, kind of later into next week. That's when all the major functionality that we're expecting to be in the fall release is now merged and getting prepared for the upcoming beta and RC testing cycles and eventually the full release. That's where we get into a lot more heavy testing of all the different aspects of the software. And this is also where, again, we try to put the notice out to you in the audience. If we have adventurous types, this is your chance to go log in, kick the tires as well, and give us some feedback before we get too deep into the release testing cycles. But also, and again, kind of an implementation detail, but important to us engineering types, this is also the kind of the checkpoint where we branch on GitHub. Usually we do that the day of the code freeze. That means what is the master branch now gets targeted at the next major release, and we open it up for all work that's intending to go into the next follow-on release, which in this case will be Half Moon 2604 in April of next year. So we'll be talking more about that in the coming months and what features are planned for that and targeted and all that good stuff. But we know, for example, that's the release that gets the new Linux LTS kernel version. So that's always an exciting time in and of itself alone, because that's when you get your new hardware support and some new cool features from upstream. So that's good. Used to be that was a little bit more scary in the past, Chris, to do, because ZFS and Linux compatibility, but not so much these days.
There's still a couple challenges with the integration there. A lot of people are still concerned about the licensing, and so far we're waiting for Oracle to try to do something, but it seems at this point they're pretty settled on the fact that when it's shipped as a kernel module and not compiled directly into it, it's likely just fine.
Yeah. No, that's the way to go with this. But really the thing that's interesting to watch is over the years, we've seen kind of the churn. It used to be anytime a new Linux kernel came out, it took a while for ZFS to catch up. They're pretty much right on top of the releases now. They tend to come out in parallel. So anyway, we'll keep an eye on it. Of course, we have an interest in making sure that stays in sync with each other. And it's nice to see that friction continue to go down with each passing year. So looking forward to that. I think next year's release is going to be fun, but we got a lot to do just going into the fall and getting ready for Goldeye.
Yeah, there should be some pretty good benefits coming out of Goldeye's release. Like we're talking about performance here. There's always been this discussion saying, ZFS hasn't been tuned for fast storage, and well, we've done a lot of work on that, and we have a couple of systems here that would probably speak to the opposite, to say, ZFS is doing very well on fast systems.
Yeah,
and it's doing even better these days.
That's an interesting thing. I think we should talk about that for a moment, Chris, which is this idea of where you're going to see performance gains. So obviously we're always putting effort into how can we get more performance out of ZFS. But the key thing is there on what kind of hardware you're on. In other words, fast modern systems and fast flash storage. I think it's pretty safe to say we've hit the point of just vastly diminished returns on anything using spinning media these days. I mean, when the bottleneck ultimately is going to end up being the drive itself, there's only so many more tiny fractions of performance we can eke out from the rest of the stack. I mean, at the end of the day, the slowest piece is still that bit of spinning rust you have sitting on the end of a SATA or SAS cable.
Exactly.
So only so much you can do there.
Yeah, if you're fighting over microseconds in a latency, that's going to make a much bigger difference on flash media, NVMe, where the media itself is measuring its latencies in microseconds. Yep. When you're hitting a spinning disk where it says just to seek from point A to point B is 7 milliseconds, that's kind of the anchor that's dragging that performance down. You can try to optimize, you can try to do that's where prefetch and reading in large blocks, things like that tend to benefit. But sort of the harder optimizations where you're squeezing out microseconds, that's going to really benefit your flash storage, because all of a sudden, if you're cutting out a couple milliseconds of time somewhere in a workflow, that's huge for flash.
That's huge. Yeah, that's huge. You can get back to letting the flash do things at its speed. But anyway, when we talk about performance in the future, Chris, and for listeners here, I think that's something to keep in mind is at the end of the day, we're having to optimize for the fastest hardware out there. And that's going to be those beefier flash systems. But, all of a sudden it does matter. So if we fine tune something like the ARC eviction, for example, that's an area that got a lot of love in this last release. Well, that's huge for flash systems. You may not see as much benefit on your spinning disk.
Yeah, people are going to ask, how does evicting things from ARC faster make my system faster? So, maybe we'll touch on that a little bit. I mean, it's the idea that people like to say that ARC is just a read cache. The R actually stands for replacement, the adaptive replacement cache. Your writes actually land in ARC as well. Those short-term, your first landing of writes, they're in your ARC as well as on your log device. So they're going to land in your ARC. They might have a very high most recently used counter, but most frequently used they're going to be 1. So they land in ARC. They may fall out of ARC very quickly. Yep. And the ability to push those things out of ARC and free up that memory to say, okay, it's ready for the next inbound write or the next piece of data that's being pulled up from disk. Speeding that up, it really helps. Anything in programming where you can get more parallelization is typically a good scenario.
That was exactly the situation here. Was they basically went from single-threaded arc eviction to a parallel arc eviction with many threads being able to do it, which again matters a lot and helps provide extra performance boost when the disk is no longer the biggest source of your bottleneck, right? So this is another thing we talk a lot about on the OS side is memcopies. For those who want to get in the weeds, that's basically just copying a region of memory from one region to another, right? Well, it turns out you have to do that a bunch of places within the kernel, between user space and the kernel, et cetera, or when you're transforming things. ZFS has a certain number of mem copies, and you can only get rid of so many. Like, we're always looking for how can we eliminate another mem copy, but at some point you just hit the point, it's like, look, I have this many, this is how many you need to perform the basic functionality, right? But now the speed at which you can do those mem copies matters. So you start throwing in faster DDR5 memory. It's like, whoa, now my performance is really uncorked.
Exactly. It used to be the case where you only needed to get sort of to a certain minimum low watermark on your memory speeds. Like, I mean, back in the day, if you had a bunch of spinning disks, you had DDR3, you know, you could have 800 megahertz DDR3, and that was still more than fast enough because, again, your bottleneck was always that, you know, the spinning platters on the opposite end of your SATA or SAS cable that had to rotate around and magnetize a bunch of rust.
Yeah.
You know, it's the drives are certainly getting bigger. Like, we've got, you know, I think Seagate's got their 30 terabyte drives commercially available now. And that's great, but you're still talking about 30 terabytes that's limited by the laws of physics. They can only spin and seek so fast. So your terabytes are going up, but your available IOPS, your input outputs per second per terabyte, those are going down. So you can say, hey, I have 30 terabytes, but I can still only, you know, do 200, maybe 300 accesses against it per second.
So it just takes it that much longer to get through, and you can imagine resilver times on those. Whew.
Exactly. Yeah, that's that's the situation where people would start going, you know, maybe Z3 is a good idea on something with these kind of sizes of drives. Who knows? Or, you know, multiple Z2s in a spare. But, you know, lots of interesting things. And I mean, of course, flash drives are getting bigger too. I mean, I think Kioxia just dropped their I think it's a 245 terabyte addressable is what they call that one. You know, let's go knock on some doors, see if we can get some of those in for qualification samples.
We're seeing some roadmaps that show, you know, 512 even, not too far out. It's like, oh, it's getting crazy. Pretty soon it'll be like, I got a petabyte in my mini. You know?
It's you know, we're experiencing. We'll be able to have a whole new generation go through those memes where they have, you know, the giant mainframe computers that stored a couple hundred megabytes or something, and then they'll say, well, now I've got a terabyte on something the size of my thumbnail. You know, we're going through that again, where now we'll be able to probably say, you know, hey, we're going to reach the first petabyte SSD in not too long from now, I'd wager.
No, I would say we're only talking single digit, small number of years before that happens. But, you know, before that, okay, you get to 512 and it's like, I have a 4-bay system and I can get how much? Oh, wow. Now, granted, those will be pricey. Say those aren't cheap. But, you know, it's still amazing that it's even a possibility.
Yeah. The things trickle down over time. It's the pace of technology. It will eventually get there. I mean, think about just, you know, the general storage available on cell phones or, you know, again, consumer machines these days. It's getting better out there. The technology is wild, even if you think about where things were 5 or 10 years ago.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of talking about some of the ZFS stuff, we should talk
speaking
about
of the pace of technology. You're going off to have some fun coming up this October in beautiful Portland, Oregon, aren't you, Chris? What are you going to be doing there?
So this is my old stomping grounds, actually. I'm from the Portland, Oregon area. Originally was Vancouver, Washington. For those who don't know, that's not Canada, so I wasn't quite up your far north there, Chris. But no, Vancouver, Washington is just right on the other side of the Columbia River from Portland, Oregon. I had my formative years out there. So they're having a conference. I'll have an excuse to go back here soon. The OpenZFS Developer Summit is going to be happening here October 25th, a couple days there. There's a user summit and a developer summit. And I'm looking forward to it, Chris. I don't personally get out to as many conferences like I used to in the past. I remember it wasn't too many years ago, or I think I gave like a dozen, maybe 13, 14 talks in a single calendar year at conferences all over the place. That was a lot. That was a lot of travel. I don't think I want to do that again. But this one's kind of special, and I enjoy this one. It's unique. It's a small conference. The OpenZFS conference is great if you're really deep into the ZFS ecosystem, which you can imagine we are here on the TrueNAS side. or either you're a super fan or professional developer. So if you're in the area and you can get out to it, go take a look. We'll have the link here in the show notes, I'm sure. You can go take a look, see if this is one you want to make an appearance at. If you're a professional developer and your company uses ZFS, you really should consider getting out to this. This is kind of your one shot a year to gather with other ZFS, really the brightest minds in the industry, and talk about the future direction and where the file system's going.
I mean, if you're watching this podcast, the odds are you're probably interested in either attending or at the very least, watching some of the talks. Yeah. They usually stream them either live on YouTube or they're posted very shortly there afterwards. They have their back catalog up there. If you want to go look, we'll give a link to the channel in the description below for their conferences. We've had a couple of them. Let's go look and see if we can find some of your talks if you've done any. And
oh gosh, that embarrassed me though.
Well, then everybody else can do that for us in the comment section. I won't do it myself. I disclaim that.
This is the good way in which open source you can get involved, though. So we get this question a lot, actually. How can I get involved? Where can I get my hands dirty with the open source community? This is one way. So conferences are a great way, but if you go watch the talks, even if you can't attend in person for whatever reason, okay, you watch the talks. We're talking about cool technology things, interesting things. It's not like any of this really happens in secret. Almost every talk you're going to hear about, there's a pull request or there's some work happening up on a GitHub repo somewhere. Like if you haven't go look at the OpenZFS repo, see what pull requests are open. Some of those correspond to talks that have been given in previous years, and they're just looking for community traction and feedback and developers to get involved and help push it over the finish line. So this is your chance, again, find out what's going on, see what's coming. And it's also a great way to kind of get a glimpse into the longer term vision and the roadmap for the storage pieces of TrueNAS, because stuff you'll hear about us talking about at the conference this year, that might be 2 years out, but it's coming. It's nice to know. I mean, I forget how many years we talked about RAID Z expansion. That was a topic for many years.
It's got to be at least
ZFS
5
conference.
It's got to be at least 5 years on that one.
That was a long one, but we were talking about like fast dedupe as well before it landed in the product. So this is your chance again to get involved, not only just for informative reasons, but if you do have kind of that developer bent, maybe you do want to get involved and at least go do a review or high level review, code review, testing if you're adventurous. Some folks do that too.
Yeah, and it's not like there's not a huge bar to get involved. I mean, sometimes it's just you need that fresh set of outside eyes. You might be a pretty new coder, but if you look at it and there's something in your mind goes, this just doesn't seem right. It might be that sort of, you look at it and say, this might seem like a silly question, and then somebody goes, you know what? We'd never thought about it that way before. If you're coming in without the blinders on from having worked with the code base for 10 or 15 years, maybe you just look at it and it's that fresh set of eyes that says, this one line doesn't seem to make sense to me. Can somebody explain it? And that's enough to have people, get looking at it. You cite your case, just say, explain this to me. And maybe they say, you know what? That doesn't make any sense. Let's rewrite that. Or maybe that's an old piece of code that needs to just go.
Mm-hmm. I will underscore testing though as well. So if there are ZFS versions or features, things that are coming that you're particularly interested in, I can't underscore enough how important it is to test and provide feedback, because believe it or not, not every developer has like every random combination of system and hardware and config and layout just at their fingertips. We don't. I mean, you have to go out to the community and say, hey, try it. Look for all the edge cases, because you can't code for every single edge case in advance.
Yeah.
So anything you can do to help test. Yeah.
Confirm somebody else's test case, even if you say, hey, this person reported something. I have a pretty similar configuration or a similar piece of hardware. I'm going to reproduce their test steps. And if you say, hey, this happens for me too, here's my logs, that makes it that much easier to be able to have everybody narrow down into the root cause.
Absolutely. So anyway, looking forward to the conference. I'm sure I'll be talking about it and give you guys a nice recap of it when it's finished. But yeah, looking forward. That's coming up here in a couple months.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's dig into a couple of user questions here. We got this one came from a number of people in the community, across the forums, across YouTube comments, across Reddit. They're asking, in Goldeye and later, are the containers still going to be based on LXC? And you want to give the short answer on that one, Chris?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, all right. There's your answer.
Okay. Now there you go.
No, let's expand on it a little. There's already a pull request open in the back end. We'll drop that in the comment section as well on YouTube, that you can look at for the sort of the work in progress efforts. The containers are still LXC based. We are using Is it? It's libvirt
libvirt
LXC.
daemon driver LXC package.
Okay.
Yep.
The full name of it. You used its
It's
full
a
name. Is it in
mouthful.
trouble?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. But that's
Okay.
the technical package name for anyone who wants to go look. There is a libvirt LXC driver, which is exactly what we're going to be using.
Okay. Yeah. And the UI side, I think we're keeping the same experience as far as, being able to select your distro from a drop-down list or a filter. We're going to make it a little bit easier on our side, right?
Yeah, the one thing we're changing is we're giving ourselves a little bit extra control where we can filter that distro list or add things to it, because there's probably not too distant future where we might have some more purpose-built LXC container images ready to go that maybe are set up for particular workloads or particular storage things. So we need the ability to drop those into the catalog and have them just show up in the UI where you can click and deploy and get going while keeping the existing list you're seeing today in Fangtooth. So that's something else we're doing, again, kind of a behind the scenes thing, but it's important and it's a little thing that we need to make it more sustainable going forward. But the pull request is open. We'll have the link here again in the notes. You're welcome to take a look. It's work in progress, but if people are interested and want to see, kind of how the sausage is made, go take a look.
Absolutely. Well, let's dig into a couple of viewer questions here. I think I've got one that it seems to be directed to you, Kris. He's talking about doing some AI coding assistance for his blogs. This is from George, where he says, I've been writing some blogs and during the process used some AI coding assistance. I wanted to share this with you guys. So he says the easy summary is that ChatGPT, he says, unfortunately was largely a waste of time for coding, which is unfortunate to hear on that one. He says Gemini was better, but it did still have quite a few errors in it. Claude AI, again, he says he's a big fan of that one, Kris. So it sounds like there's a bit of consensus here. He says, hands down, it's 100 times better. It didn't make any errors. It was on point. It was very accurate. The only downside is, he says, it's not cheap. But I guess in this case, you're getting what you pay for.
Get what you pay for here. That's interesting. He ranked them that way. I probably would have said Gemini at the bottom of the list, ChatGPT next, and then Claude AI up at the top here. Gemini is interesting. That's the one I am curious to watch because it's got, Google and Google money behind it. Interesting to see. I think they did something smart. I mentioned in a previous episode where they're going to give it away for free for personal developers. But the caveat is, if you get something for free, it means you're the product. And so they're going to be using all your coding efforts to train the future models, which that actually is kind of brilliant on Google's part, because they're probably going to be able to add a lot of knowledge and information to Gemini as long as they can filter out the crap. Because us developers would never do dumb things, I'm sure.
Training on the bulk of code from the internet, that may not be fantastic. Like you certainly wouldn't want to post everything that had ever been written on Stack Overflow and say, train on this. I'm sure it's all good.
It's like training Grok on Twitter posts or X posts or whatever the heck it is. I'm sure that'll never backfire.
Wrong. No way that can go wrong. Good Lord.
Yeah, so that'll be the challenge to Google, is to see how they can kind of filter the good quality from the bad quality things coming in the front door. And if they can do that, I think they have a solid business model. ChatGPT is interesting because I think they're going to be in a weird situation here where people like Claude are doing things very purpose-built for development. And so Chat's going to have to make a decision if they're going to go after that market segment specifically or go do other things. We'll see, though. Like I said, Claude AI, again, it's not perfect either. I wouldn't say no errors. As a matter of fact, I was just having a conversation with the engineering staff the other day. Like, if you're not sitting there writing it constantly, like, you're probably not using it right. Like, I'm sitting there, it's exhausting. It's like driving an 8-hour-long road trip all day. And you know how you're mentally tired from just all the paying attention and keeping your eyes on the road? It's kind of like that when you're doing good AI development. You're sitting there hand in hand, walking through everything with it. And sometimes it'll go for long stretches and it's like, it's kind of doing things right. This is great. And then other times, for no reason that you can perceive, it goes way off the deep end. It's like you're just mashing the escape button. Stop. And let me correct you, 10 times now to get you back on track where I want you to go. So again, it's not completely perfect, but it's interesting to see, and it's evolving quickly. It's weird how quickly it's changed.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's interesting things.
But anyway, good to see. Oh, the one thing I will say on Gemini, I've used Gemini's CLI tool, is it does get really confused very easily. It's strange. Like it'll run into an error editing a file and get caught in a loop where it can't edit the file for some reason because it's, grep and said, pipeline broke for some reason. And then instead of recognizing the fact that it errored out, it'll go right back to, oh, I see this file here I need to edit because it needs a code change. Let me edit it for you. And then the edit fails, and then it goes right back to the loop again. So you'll take your eyes off it for a second and come back and see it's looped hundreds of times trying to edit the same file and failing and falling flat on its face. So again, it's just immature. Give it time.
Yeah. That's where you want to be monitoring it and make sure you're just not, letting it bill you per token or per, hour of iteration, because that could get, you get a nasty surprise with that for sure.
I wonder when the first guys will get caught, the first AI providers will get caught where they've purposely made the AI do dumb things or be stupid or repetitive on purpose. Because again, they're billing you for tokens. So
yeah,
you have to wonder, the temptation's there.
I'm sure it's there. Hopefully nobody out there falls for that one.
We're watching you. Yeah, don't go down that road. Anyway, okay. Well, next up, we got Joe, who writes from the forums. Joe's been around a long time. We've known Joe since way back in the free NAS days. But let me read his question here. He says, it seems like there are a lot of metadata corruption issues as of late. I'd rather not speculate myself as to why the uptick in popularity. I don't know if they're popular, but yeah.
Frequency, maybe.
Yeah, frequencies may be a better word there. I have been running a 4 or 6 disk RAID Z2 since FreeNAS 8.01. Yes, that is a long time. Seriously, that's amazing. Longer than I don't even think I deployed with an 8. I think it was 9 was the first one I personally deployed. But anyway, that's awesome. Thankfully, I have never seen a metadata error on any of my TrueNAS machines. So seeing this uptick concerns me, and as I am certain others in the community may grow concerned also. Did something happen with ZFS to cause this? As I said, I don't want to speculate. I leave that up to people significantly smarter in this area than myself. Would you please explain the top reasons that metadata corruption may occur? What pool configurations are not plagued by this issue? I understand RAID Z is the pool layout that gets hit with this problem. Any suggestions you might have for the community? He says he also wants to thank the Honey Badger for bending over backwards to help people experiencing these problems. So, Honey Badger, what have we seen with this? Because this has been a topic we've discussed.
This has been a topic, and I have been in the forums a fair bit. I have seen this one, Joe, so thank you very much for pointing it out and sort of calling it to our attention. So I've been in there looking at a couple different users who have basically reported that after a power outage, a system crash, or some other event, their pool doesn't mount, and it ends up being that when we dig into the logs, so there's a lot of verbosity when you open the hood of ZFS. You can look at the debug messages of exactly what it's doing. So I'll post some of the information and maybe a link to some guidelines in the comments below. But it'll tell you exactly what it's doing as far as when it's trying to mount the pool and potential problems. And we did see a couple where it was actually calling out that there was some metadata corruption at the top level, and it wasn't able to mount it. Now, some of these are related to what I would consider as a less than optimal hardware configuration. We've had a number of users who, the vast majority of these users, I hate to say it, you aren't using ECC memory. I don't want to point to that as, the panacea and just be like, oh, ECC solves all your problems, because it doesn't. It can certainly alert you to problems, but it doesn't necessarily fix everything. And there was one user that did say that they're having challenges, and they do have a platform that has ECC. But basically, when you go to mount these pools, if the metadata is not perfectly healthy, ZFS is much, much preferring to say, hey, I want to let you choose to interact with this, and whether or not you want to risk, disabling this metadata check. We'll usually do that. We'll mount the pool read-only. We'll have them look at their most recently written data, make sure everything is healthy in that front. And then usually we'll either be able to rewind it a couple of transactions to an earlier state where the metadata is healthy. But in some cases, we've actually had to mount the pool read-only, transfer things off, and then back on. Mm-hmm. The reasons for this corruption, a lot of them do come down to some hardware. I've seen some unusual storage controller choices in a couple scenarios. A lot of them, it's been a drive has failed. I'll see it in the D message log or something, where we're having hundreds to thousands of timeouts of SATA or SAS commands trying to communicate with the disks. We've had some SMR drives show up in there. Those are obviously suboptimal, because when an SMR drive shingled magnetic recording, when it has to sort of rewrite one of those shingles, it's a 256 megabyte chunk traditionally at this point. Mm-hmm. So if it happens to be rewriting a chunk that contains crucial metadata for the pool, and it's then interrupted at that moment, it's not guaranteed that, the data is where, ZFS and the block mapping table of those internal drives, because they almost behave like a flash drive light in that sense, is where it thinks it's going to be. Pool configurations that may or may not get hit by this. He mentioned that RAID Z is the one that seems to get hit with it. I think that's just a challenge of it's the one that is surfacing it most frequently, because when people make their pool and they use RAID Z, typically it's only a single vdev. What ZFS does with metadata is it will actually do multiple copies of it across available vdevs. Those users that are using mirrors typically will have, 3, maybe 4 vdevs of mirrored pairs. So ZFS says, well, I'll write this crucial metadata across all of these different vdevs. So if it happens to be damaged on, vdev 1, it can say, well, I've got copies on vdevs 2, 3, and 4, and I can pull it from there and recover. So, it's just there's a number of different things that could potentially be causing this. So far, we haven't found like a smoking gun behind it. We haven't even really found anything that's smoke, except maybe in the case of the gentleman who was running his drives in an enclosure where they were reaching the high 60 degrees Celsius temperature. We were probably close to having some smoke in that scenario. That's not the kind of heat-assisted magnetic recording that you want to have on your drives. It doesn't,
that doesn't
help
give
them.
You more capacity.
It doesn't. Heating up the bits does not make them shrink, nor does it make them expand. It just makes them unhealthy and unhappy. But yeah, so I am watching this certainly on the forums. We're looking to try to find some way to be able to link a common thread. Certainly, whenever I see something like this, I'm definitely wanting to be in there. I've had people tag me, which I greatly appreciate. So I want to get in there and see exactly what is happening in sort of the guts of the pool where this is going sideways. The challenge we always have, though, is when somebody's got an issue where their pool's not mounting and they can't get access to their data, the first priority they want to have is, I need access back to my data, which is, it's challenging because, of course, we'd love to be able to say, hey, freeze everything where it is. Let's coordinate a time with a bunch of engineers and we'll sort of try to pick this thing apart. Obviously, we want to get the person back online, using their system and accessing their data. So I'm trying here in the background as best I can to sort of break a system in a reproducible manner that gets one of these corruptions. So far, I haven't been able to do that. And I mean, I'm yanking the power out of drives mid-write. I'm hammering them. I haven't tried cooking any drives, so I'm not overheating things deliberately. But it's being challenging to do it. But if,
Chris,
again,
you've been over backwards looking into these. We've been watching, and Chris coordinates with our lead file system developers here too, and kind of gets their review of the debugs and information. And that's kind of the frustrating thing here is there is no common thread or smoking gun where even the developers are like, I don't see anything here. It looks ZFS at fault necessarily. But there's always kind of extenuating circumstances we're seeing. Now, I will say something to the frequency argument, because that's a fair point, Joe. One of the things I'll mention, or we've mentioned, I think, on the show, is we've talked about kind of the growth of the FreeNAS, TrueNAS community in the past few years. In the last 5 years, we've 4x'd the size of the community, the number of systems in the wild running TrueNAS. Okay, we've gone through this explosive growth period, and I will say, since the transition to Linux, we've also kind of lowered the bar in some ways on what kind of systems people are building and throwing TrueNAS on top of. Because there used to be a little bit higher bar there, and that, you had to buy certain hardware and certain cards and this and that, so it would work well enough to run on FreeNAS FreeBSD base, right?
Yeah, FreeBSD was definitely we'll say it was just a little bit pickier on the hardware it wanted to play nice with. At Realtek and ASMedia, ring any bells?
Yeah. Linux is a little more generous in that it'll run on more things, but it doesn't mean you should be running on those things, right? So we see a lot more interesting, let's put that in air quotes, configurations than we normally did.
Just to be clear, sometimes we get accused of, people will go on there and they say, oh, you guys are gatekeeping. And it's like, everybody has to have this hardware. It will run, as Chris says, it will run on many, many different systems. It's only out of sort of an abundance of my own caution that I'm just recommending, saying, hey, these things have worked incredibly well for me in the past. They've been close to bulletproof. That's why I recommend the hardware that I do. It's not out of some necessity to say, if you don't use ECC memory and an LSI HBA and a Chelsea IO or Intel or Mellanox network card, I don't want to hear from you. It's like, no, I'm just telling you, this is, in my experience, working with ZFS, working with these servers, this has been what has been rock stable for me. But build what you like.
But at
I
the end
just
of the
want to
day,
share.
this is something, Joe, we do keep a close eye on. Those kind of go to the top of the pile as far as things we're interested in and take a personal look into when they show up on the forum. So keep calling them out. Again, we'll keep investigating and do our best to help poor stranded users who end up in a bad way. And if there ever does show up anything that's interesting on the ZFS side or on the file system side or the OS or kernel, wherever, that needs to be addressed, of course, we're going to go take a look at it. But thus far, nothing has surfaced that, like Chris said, that even looks like smoke. There's not even a common enough thing to say, it looks like there could be something in this area. We don't even have anything yet like that.
Yeah. It's still very much throwing darts in the dark. We're not able to, sort of, we need to find an entry point to start digging into it and go through the code to say, this is where things are falling down. The one exception to that, and I will just kind of divert real quick before we wrap up, is the first thing I'm going to ask you when I see a certain kind of pathology, as I'm going to ask you, do you have deduplication turned on? Because we mentioned this on a previous cast, Chris. Fast dedupe is not magic dedupe. There is still a RAM cost, and part of what makes deduplication work really well in our newer versions is the addition of the special vdevs, because deduplication tables are still very small records. The records have actually shrunk. They used to be around, I think it was about a 320 byte record normally. It's actually gotten a bit smaller since. So the way of managing them is better. But you are still, especially if you're doing deduplication on a pure hard drive pool without any SSDs for your metadata, that's still something that your deduplication table is going to struggle, especially if you have to do a lot of reads or a lot of updates to that table. It's going to be a challenge. You're asking spinning disks to do lots of small IO. They don't like doing it. And that, it may look like your system's working fine for quite a while. It's been up for, 100 days. You've been loading data onto it. Everything seems to be, going just fine on your single gigabit network connection that you're just streaming things in and out of. Hey, it's been great. And then you go to reboot your system. And all of a sudden it says, oh, that last shutdown, or you have a power outage. That last shutdown was unhealthy. Let me scrub that pool. And all of a sudden, you need to read that entire deduplication table or huge chunks of it up from spinning disks. So you're now asking your spinning disks to do a whole lot of teeny tiny IOs that are spread out across the drive. Remember when I said earlier in the episode about IOPS per terabyte and how that number's gone down? If you're only getting a couple hundred IOPS out of, 18 terabyte disks, and you've filled them up to 60 or 70% full, you might be waiting a long time for that pool to import and scrub.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, pay attention before you turn on options like that. Again, we've cautioned in previous episodes on it is not magic. There is nothing magic. There's always a cost if you're turning on any feature.
Exactly. Make sure that your workload will benefit from the feature. Make sure that you understand the feature. If you don't understand the feature, hey, ask questions. Come to us on the podcast. Come to us in the forums. Send me an email. Reach out. We're happy to help you. We want people to have a good experience. Again, we're not trying to gatekeep. We're not trying to say you can't do something. We just want to make sure that when you do choose to do it, it's going to be a good time.
Absolutely. Yeah. So speaking of dropping us an email.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of dropping us an email, that's our show for the week. We're going to come back again next week with another episode, hopefully with a bunch more technical goodness, just like we had in this one. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. If you do want to submit a question, a comment, we have an email, of course. It's t3@truenas.com. You can drop your message in the comment section below here on the video, in any of the social medias where we post this video, if it's on Reddit, on forums. Discord might not be the best. Sometimes they get lost there. But, please do the usual YouTube video things for us. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, ring the notification bell, and come back to listen to us next week. Stay on top of all your latest TrueNAS and tech topics. And if you happen to be one of those early eager upgraders for the .2 release, go ahead and submit your feedback. We'll maybe have a little bit of a segment on it in the next show.
Comments on YouTube or the forums. We'd love to hear from you, but that'll be good to talk about.
Sounds good. So thanks for tuning in again this week. We'll see you next time.